You could be surrounded by 100 people and still feel like you're screaming into a void. That's the part no one talks about. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being unknown. And the most isolated people on earth aren't sitting in empty rooms. They're laughing at parties. They're posting photos. They're saying, "I'm fine," so convincingly that even they start to believe it. But here's what I'm going to show you today. There's a hidden psychology behind why some people end up with no friends. And it has nothing to do with being antisocial, weird, or broken. In fact, the truth is the exact opposite of what most people assume. By the end of this video, you'll understand something that takes most people decades to figure out. Or they never figure it out at all. Because loneliness doesn't start with rejection. It starts with protection. And that difference changes everything. See, we've been taught that people without friends are the problem. That they're too cold, too distant, too difficult to connect with. But what if I told you that most of them aren't avoiding connection because they don't want it? What if the real reason is that they wanted it too much? That they cared so deeply, noticed so much, felt so intensely, that eventually their own mind decided connection was too dangerous to pursue? There's a term in psychology called learned social helplessness. And once you understand what it does to a person's brain, you'll never look at lonely people the same way again. But we need to start somewhere else first. Because before I can explain how this happens, you need to see what loneliness actually looks like when it's hiding. The quiet version. The one that smiles. The one that performs normalcy so perfectly that nobody ever thinks to ask if something's wrong. That's the version most people never recognize. Not in their coworkers. Not in their family members. And sometimes not even in themselves. So if you've ever felt invisible even in a crowded room, if you've ever wondered why connection feels so easy for everyone else but so exhausting for you, this video isn't just going to explain it. It's going to show you exactly why your brain works this way. And more importantly, what actually happens when someone spends years living in that silence. What it does to your sense of time. What it does to your ability to trust. And what it does to the way you see yourself. Only at the end will everything connect. Stay with me. Here's what most people don't understand about becoming friendless. It almost never happens overnight. There's no single moment where someone decides, "I don't need anyone." It's slower than that. Quieter. It happens through small cuts that never fully heal. You share something personal and someone laughs. You trust someone with a secret and weeks later it's a joke at your expense. You reach out and get silence. You try to open up and feel completely misunderstood. And each time your brain takes a note, files it away, and eventually, without you even realizing it, a pattern forms. Connection equals pain. Vulnerability equals regret. So the safest thing to do is stop trying. And at first, solitude feels like relief. You have control. No one can disappoint you. No one can use your words against you. There's a certain peace in not needing anyone. But that peace has a shelf life. Because here's what happens neurologically when you go too long without social bonds. Your brain starts to interpret isolation as a threat. The same regions that light up when you're in physical pain begin activating in response to loneliness. That's not a metaphor. Loneliness literally hurts. Your heart rate changes. Your sleep gets lighter. Your nervous system starts scanning for danger in places where there isn't any. This is ancient programming. Humans evolved in tribes. And for most of our history, being separated from the group meant death. Your brain hasn't updated for the modern world. So when you're isolated, it doesn't understand that you're safe in your apartment with Netflix. It just knows you're alone. And it panics. That's why people who've been lonely for a long time often seem anxious, guarded, or hypervigilant. They overanalyze every text message. They assume disinterest where none exists. They read rejection into neutral situations. Not because they're paranoid, but because their brain has been trained by years of small disappointments to expect the worst. And here's where it gets darker. This hypervigilance creates a loop. You become cautious. People sense that caution as coldness. They pull back. And their distance confirms exactly what you were afraid of. That you're not worth staying for. It's not your fault. But it becomes your pattern. But that's just the surface. What most people never talk about is what happens inside when this goes on for years. how it changes your relationship with time, how it distorts the way you see yourself, and how it quietly erases something most people don't even realize they need. Loneliness doesn't just affect how you feel. It affects how you experience reality itself. When you have no one to share your moments with, time starts moving differently. Days blur together. Weekends lose meaning. Holidays become just another day to get through. Psychologists have actually measured this. Loneliness distorts time perception. Minutes feel longer. Hours feel heavier. Because when you're disconnected, you're not living in the flow of life. You're living inside your own head. And that's a very different kind of existence. But there's something even more unsettling. Friendship isn't just about company. It's a mirror. It reflects parts of yourself you can't see alone. Without that mirror, it becomes harder to know if you're growing. Harder to know who you're becoming. You start to feel unreal. Like your existence doesn't echo anywhere. Like you're watching your own life from the outside, but no one else is watching at all. That's the quiet pain of having no friends. Not the loneliness itself. The invisibility. The feeling that if you disappeared tomorrow, the world would just keep moving. And very few people would notice the gap. If this resonates with you, I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means your brain adapted to survive something difficult. And adaptation always has a cost. See, people without friends often develop something psychologists call a distorted social self-concept. It's the way you imagine others see you. And when you've spent years being ignored, excluded, or misunderstood, that inner image becomes warped. You start assuming everyone will see you the same way. Even when someone is genuinely kind to you, you doubt it. You think they're just being polite. You question every moment of warmth because your brain has been trained to expect the cold. And over time, you stop just avoiding rejection. You start rejecting yourself before anyone else gets the chance. You dim your own light so you won't be disappointed when no one notices it. Have you ever caught yourself doing that? Pulling back before you even gave someone a chance to stay? That's not weakness. That's a survival mechanism built by years of unspoken pain. But here's what almost no one talks about. The very thing that makes lonely people withdraw is also what makes them extraordinary. There's a hidden depth that develops when you spend years on the outside looking in. A kind of emotional intelligence most people never build. And that paradox is the key to understanding how loneliness actually ends. Not through forcing yourself to be social, but through something much more counterintuitive. The people who have no friends often make the best ones. And that's not just a nice thing to say. It's psychologically true. Think about it. When you've spent years on the outside, you develop something most people never do. You learn to observe. You notice the microshifts in tone. You feel energy changes that others miss completely. You can tell when someone's smile is real and when it's performance. Because when connection is rare, you pay attention to every detail of it. People who've been lonely for a long time often have extraordinary emotional depth. They think about relationships more carefully than anyone else. They don't want surface-level small talk. They crave something real. And because they know what it feels like to be unseen, they tend to see others more clearly. They're the ones who notice when someone's being left out. The ones who check in quietly because they understand how much that matters. The paradox is brutal. The very people who struggle to find connection are often the most capable of building meaningful ones. If only someone would see them first. And this is what nobody tells you. Healing from long-term loneliness doesn't start with finding new people. It starts with grieving the old versions of yourself. The version that begged for attention and got silence. The version that accepted crumbs and called it care. The version that edited themselves down just to fit somewhere they were never meant to belong. Those versions were survival strategies. And they worked. But they also kept you invisible. The moment you stop trying to earn friendship and start remembering who you were before the silence began, something shifts. You stop attracting from hunger. You start attracting from wholeness. And the connections that come from wholeness are completely different. Because friendship doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence. The willingness to show up, imperfect and real. And the right people won't need you to perform. They'll meet you exactly where you are. They'll feel the quiet in you not as absence, but as depth. Your brain can learn connection again. Neural pathways change through repetition, not miracles. Every time you answer a message instead of overthinking it, every time you say yes when you're scared, every time you let someone see the unedited version of you, your mind rewires a little. It starts to believe that maybe, just maybe, belonging is possible again. Loneliness is not a permanent state. It's a season, a psychological winter, and winter always ends. If this kind of truth helps you see yourself or the world a little differently, subscribe, because this channel is about the things nobody says out loud, the patterns running underneath, the psychology that shapes us before we even realize it's happening. More videos like this are coming, and some of them will hit even harder than this one. So here's where we land. Not having friends doesn't make you less human. It makes your story quieter. But quiet stories can be the most powerful ones. They're filled with self-discovery, with depth, with a kind of awareness that only comes from spending time in the silence. Some of the greatest thinkers, artists, and creators in history spent years alone before they ever found their people. And when they finally did, those connections were different, deeper, built on something real, because they had learned to love their own company first. They didn't need someone to complete them. They wanted someone to witness them. That's the difference between loneliness and solitude. One is a prison. The other is preparation. So if you're someone with no friends right now, understand this. You're not broken. You're not unworthy. You're in the middle of becoming. And the world hasn't forgotten you. It's waiting for you to remember yourself. There will come a day when you sit across from someone and they look at you like they've known you forever. And in that moment, every quiet night, every unanswered message, every invisible ache will finally make sense. You'll realize that the solitude wasn't punishment. It was shaping you into the kind of person who could hold real connection when it finally arrived. You'll stop chasing crowds and start cherishing the rare. You'll stop performing and start recognizing energy. And you'll understand that friendship was never about quantity. It was always about recognition. Two people looking at each other and silently thinking, I thought I was the only one. That's the truest kind of connection. Not built from constant conversation, built from quiet understanding. From two souls who both knew loneliness and decided together that they never have to feel it the same way again. So until then, walk gently with yourself. Speak kindly. And remember, even if no one is standing beside you right now, you are still worthy of being known. Because loneliness was never the end of your story. It was just the place where your next chapter begins.